I mentioned in my last video about the trope growing the beard, where a product finally finds their stride, where the show or cartoon or movie series or even websites become better for their viewers and consumers. But what would happen if the beard has been shaved off? This is a trope called seasonal rot. It asks, what would happen if the product goes on the wayside and it dips in quality? Maybe there are too many cooks in the kitchen. What if certain aspects that made the product good were replaced and the product changed? What if motivations have changed and nothing adds up? Anything that has been long running has went through a period of this. However, there does come a point in time when we look back and start to look at things differently. Maybe it's something we didn't need back then, but we need now. This is something I forgot to mention in my Led Zeppelin 3 video. Sure, it was negatively received. However, like many things that were received negatively, it took years for reappraisal, and people do agree that Zeppelin 3 was the moment that Zeppelin became Zeppelin. What would happen if your breakthrough came out and it was so popular that the other releases were not considered on par? What if the release is considered the nadir of your career, but it really wasn't? Cut back to 2004. Pop-punk band Green Day were riding high with a career resurrection with their American Idiot album, quite possibly being their biggest album of their career. Not only did it bring them back from the brink, but it brought them tons of accolades, which included Grammy Awards, and it appeared on multiple lists of greatest albums of all time, and it was declared 6 times platinum in the US. And on top of all that, it brought legions of new fans who, like me, thought this was a new band, which was obviously not true. But nonetheless, the band gained new fans who wanted to know a little bit more about them. And the best thing about an established band put out a major new release is that they have a back catalog. When one goes back through their career, you realize that Green Day were not always like this, but, in fact, had a lot more to offer. But before American Idiot, they were being written off. 10 years earlier, Green Day released Dookie, which took a while to get going due to the fact that it was released when grunge was still going strong, albeit when the wheels were starting to wobble a bit. However, when Kurt Cobain committed suicide, the wheels came off and the grunge association was quickly abandoned. Cobain's death was the nail in the coffin of a very dark, dreary, depressing genre, and people looked to Green Day because they were a lighter alternative. They were 3 men who showed that they could write songs about panic attacks, mass murder, and divorce, but do it in a way that was lighthearted, which was the point because pop-punk was a breather after grunge. Like American Idiot before it, Dookie had a lot of accolades, eventually being certified diamond, and was considered the most important pop-punk album. And with all that praise for this album, it was going to be a tough act to follow. Their next 2 albums had varying degrees of success, with 1995's Insomniac being a darker version of Dookie, and Nimrod being an album that goes all over the place in terms of rock. Unfortunately, they had brought diminishing returns, but it paled in comparison to what came next. Green Day released an album that was considered the nadir of their career, Warning. If Insomniac was considered the darker version of Dookie, then Warning is considered the lighter version of Insomniac. There is a good reason as to why I did this video and the Led Zeppelin 3 video so close together. It is because they both had the same reception when they came out. Like Led Zeppelin 3, the edge in Warning is there, but in a different form. Warning is kind of going in a way that Nimrod was, meaning that it was going in a lighter and softer way. Green Day wanted to move away from pop-punk, though it was because another genre weakened the momentum of the genre. And rather than the band going in that direction to keep up with the times, they went for the opposite end for inspiration. And Billy Joe Armstrong's main source of inspiration for Warning was Bob Dylan, specifically his 1965 album Bringing It All Back Home, and both albums had similar stories. Both albums were considered new sound albums from well-established music acts, and both albums were eviscerated upon release due to the sudden change. But really, the change was not subtle but gradual. If you look at the albums that they released before, Green Day had always changed their sound. It was just that people only liked them for doing the one thing, and the fans latched onto that. Growing is necessary, and that is what Green Day wanted to do. And they went from immature boys who talked about masturbation to mature men who were socially conscious and optimistic. Pop punk had that rebellious aspect to its music, and it kind of rebelled against punk itself, and by that aspect, Warning is as pop punk as it could get. Like Led Zeppelin 3, there were familiar aspects, but it was mostly folk influenced. The fact that this change didn't match the band was not well received, but the one aspect that people, critics specifically, agreed on is that Billy Joe's songwriting was top notch. It is the fact that this critically maligned album showcased the lead singer's lyrical ability goes to show that this band had gotten better. The title track is about having one life to live and throwing precaution to the wind. Church on Sunday is about starting over in a relationship and making compromises to become a better person, something inspired by Billy Joe and his wife. Castaway is about not doing what everybody else is doing and do what you want. And Waiting is about putting your best foot forward and keeping going, not giving up. Minority is about standing up for your beliefs, and Authority should not make up your mind. We are all our own people and we have a voice. We all have the same rights. So yes, the writing here is a stepping stone to their next album, after the original one's master tapes were stolen. The musical style has changed, but the lyrics are still punk. It is a new sound album coming from this band, musically and lyrically, and people were not willing to give it a chance back when it was released, which was in 2000. And folk rock style music was not what most people were looking for. What people were looking for was harder, edgier, heavier, angsty, and very, very angry. And with the wave of nu metal, the type of music Green Day did on Warning just felt out of place. And with a semi-nihilistic band like these men making a change like this, you can kind of see why Warning got the reception it did. Unlike their previous albums, it didn't reach platinum status. It marked their lowest point in their career, and then, after a while, it went ignored. However, like Bringing It All Back Home, Warning's story has a happy ending. It took time, but people slowly but surely looked at it as an overlooked gem. It mainly has something to do with the fact that nu metal is no longer the force that it was, and people were willing to go into this album with an open mind, and saw that it was much better than they realized. After American Idiot, the band would go on to a political slant, albeit in a darker way, but Warning goes to show that this political slant and strong songwriting didn't come out of nowhere. Warning shows that they didn't need to go towards what was popular, rather they would do their own thing. It's a standout album that showcases what a band can do and how they can put their best foot forward, and using stepping stones to bigger and better things.